A couple of days ago, someone asked me a simple question. Could I explain how I set up my audio compression for playing games like Escape from Tarkov so that they could hear things better? To which I said, sure. I don't consider myself an audiophile, but I do understand audio to the degree that I have engineered live sound performances, and I grew up in a household where my dad was a live sound engineer and continues to be one for as long as I can remember. That doesn't necessarily qualify me to know and understand everything there is to know about compression, but I believe I could do the teaching of the topic some justice, insofar as video games are concerned anyway. But that got me thinking, would this be of value to any of you in actually making the video? Unfortunately, when I set out to make pieces of content, I do have to consider things like sponsors that want to make sure videos I produce are things that people want to watch and get some views. And then there's also the time that I put into them. I obviously want to create content that people view because, believe it or not, from scripting, tracking, editing, and of course, who can forget those memorable thumbnails made by our old buddy Saint, these things take time and money to produce. So naturally, I went to Twitter and the YouTube community to ask a simple question. Would a video on compression be something that you would want to see and or understand? And it was an apparent and overwhelming yeah. The day I created those requests, I also had set it up as a live stream title on Twitch, which I don't know if you guys knew that I stream on Twitch, and something interesting happened. The conversation that sparked during that live stream ended up diving into something a bit more sinister, and it showed me that there's a lot of misconception about audio compression that I think leads people to believe that audio compression, and even more so EQ settings in Tarkov, are a form of cheating, utilizing the argument of, if it were meant to be modified in-game, then there would be an in-game setting for it. But I find this argument to have a few holes. I want to be very clear that given how many different manufacturers of earbuds, headphones, in-ear monitors, and even speakers that there are, it would be almost impossible to develop a sound engine inside of a video game that wouldn't inherently cause one brand of headphones or earbuds to outperform another. Also, there is the consideration that different sound cards inside of different computers, even the motherboards that those sound cards are working with, could cause different audio performance. Not to mention the hardware that each of these different sound devices that we all put on our heads or on our desks are made of. Some of them have incredibly good frequency response, and others are just there to make sound. Then there's also the human element. Some people simply are able to detect sound better than other people, depending on things like sound exposure over time. Tinnitus, which is a disorder where people hear ringing in their ears, either always or from time to time, which is caused by a variety of different factors, other hearing loss issues, or even age, because it's been proven that the younger you are, the more detail, especially with high-frequency tones, those people are able to hear. Could Tarkov include a fully digital equalizer and compression option inside of their game? Sure, but I can't think of any mainstream shooter in recent past that included any equalization options inside of their game aside from maybe different audio profile presets to give different cinematic effects. And those presets, much like everything else in Tarkov, when they are switched on, cost resources. Resources that would likely cost you frame rate, which especially on the newest map Lighthouse seems to be the thing that people are constantly fighting. How do I get more frames? Right? On the outside, sure, it would be perfect if you could snap your fingers and have an adjustable in-game setting for equalization and compression, but there are already EQ and compression presets in the game. They're purchasable in-game, and those can be used as soon as you have access to them. Those are found in the in-game headsets. You ever wonder why you hear things better with headsets on? If you want to check out a detailed overview of how those headsets in the game work, what they sound like, and the EQ and compression presets that are provided by them, Veritas did a very, very good in-depth review of each headset and what they sound like. Twice, actually, I believe. I don't think, with all of the variance in sound and sound perception, that it would make a lot of sense to provide a ton of audio settings inside of the game. It's a much more realistic expectation, especially with how gaming headsets and their accessory hardware is marketed to us, to utilize some of the many different methods available to us to modify those sound profiles ourselves to what we prefer. So back to the matter at hand, though. Compression, to put it simply, is either a boosting or a limiting of produced sounds to stay within a given range of volume. Quiet sounds are made louder, and louder sounds are made quieter. This is done using a compressor, either one from a piece of hardware like what I use in my PreSonus 16.0.2 digital mixer, or through various software solutions like the free-to-use Voicemeeter Banana and the ever-mentioned free-to-use program SoundLock that are both relatively easy to use and set up with many YouTube guides to help you along the way. If you are only looking for compression and not other bells and whistles like what Voicemeeter Banana provides, I highly recommend using SoundLock. It's straightforward, very easy to set up for yourself. A physical mixer like mine only gives you additional options to modify how that compressor works in ways that most people outside of studio audio production would likely never use or want to use. I also want to be very clear that SoundLock is a compressor. It's just a compressor by a different name. It works exactly the way that every other compressor works. The idea of this with Tarkov, and the reason why so many consider that boosting audio in Tarkov is considered cheating, is because of the compressor boosting quieter sounds. Or to put it another way, I can hear footsteps of people from further away. I want you all to know, if you've made it this far, that I do not consider compression to be cheating in any way. And my intention with this video is to try to prove that to you. Of course, by this point in the video, someone has inevitably already turned it off, or hell, maybe even didn't bother clicking play in the first place. And they've already commented, yes, this is cheating, or the like. I would ask that if you did make it this far, look for them in the comments and be sure to respond to them that they should have made it past the first few minutes before they added to the conversation. Let me first show you the difference between audio compression being enabled and audio compression being disabled. I'm in a rather unique position where I can enable and disable my compression settings on the fly with the push of a button on my mixer. So, I feel like I should be demonstrating this to you first. Okay, here I am in factory with my handy-dandy Saiga 12 unsuppressed so that we have nice loud noise. Now, I want to show this in two different ways. One is running along and firing with compression on, and then running along and firing with compression off. The other thing that I want to illustrate is showing the audio levels at something similar to what you would want it at if you were realistically, or what I prefer to have it at in order to realistically hear footsteps, versus compressed audio where I have that already set up for me. Okay? Probably about there. Now when I fire, it's slightly louder, but nothing horrible. But if I turn the compression off, and then I want to get the bass audible level of my footstep sounds, etc., to hear, where I can hear comfortably what is going on around me, that's what this sounds like. There's the compressor off. And now we have the volume turned up to where I can hear the footsteps. But the difference is, when I pull the trigger, now I'm just below the level where I'm hurting my ears. And there are people that will turn this up even louder to something like this, where they can hear footsteps even better. But when they pull the trigger, now we're peaking. And that's where the problem starts to come in, because this is where hearing damage starts. But if I turn the compressor back on, even though I have the volume turned up a bit, I'm still protecting myself by a considerable amount. On the surface, this looks like it could be considered cheating, or exploiting audio, or some form of soft cheating, or however you want to explain it to someone, an unfair advantage, but allow me to explain this in a different way. If in watching this video you had your audio turned up, the recording meter in OBS when I fired those gunshots in the uncompressed audio section redlined on the OBS meter. This means that it drove the sound card to the point where the audio would begin to distort. This also means that in that instance, had your own volume been turned up to the level that I would normally have mine at, this is at the level where hearing damage would have occurred. With prolonged exposure, and in my case that's over 7,000 hours in RAID, that level of exposure would lead to some level of permanent hearing loss. However, with the compressor on, I am able to enjoy the benefit from the same level of volume as if I had turned my volume up, but when my unsuppressed gun fired, I wasn't risking, or at least not nearly risking as badly, the chance of my having damaged my own hearing. That's the point. In my experience, the pursuit of gamers attempting to gain an audio advantage over others by needing to hear those subtle sounds, they will increase the volume to an absurdly high and indefinitely damaging level from long-term exposure to those levels of sound. In the Tarkov sense, compression does nothing more than attempt to keep that from happening. Compressors save your ears. That's it. Also, if you notice, the difference in sound between the compressed audio and uncompressed audio also means that the ambient sounds, like the whirring of the background engines in factory, rain outdoors, wind, etc., also are amplified. This actually creates more noise pollution. I mention this because people sometimes think that compression will only make footstep sounds louder while eliminating the other sounds around them, and that's just not true. A compressor doesn't do that. All of the quieter sounds are amplified, not just the ones that you would prefer to hear. It's the same as just turning up the volume with the benefit of not blowing your ears out, and that of course can be a drawback if you're trying to get away from extra noise pollution of heavy rain. Another drawback when it comes to compression is gauging distance. In Tarkov, the further away something is, the quieter it becomes, obviously. Added compression will make faraway sounds feel considerably closer to you. What at one time gauged at being 10 meters away, or that you gauged being 10 meters away, actually might be 30 meters. And this is because when you force quieter sounds into a more audible band, it begins to warp and remove the dynamism of the audio. There is less moodiness to it. It's the same reason why older tracks from Led Zeppelin way back when sound considerably different than rock tracks that are created today. There's an awful lot of compression in today's music that forces everything to fall into some similar level of loudness. For those of you that have stuck it out to this long in the video, I want to thank you for hanging. I personally believe that everyone should be using some form of audio compression in their gaming. We only get one set of ears, and your years of playing Tarkov or other loud AF games shouldn't be the reason why one day you won't be able to hear your kids or your grandkids calling you from another room. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.